Welcome in. It is May 14th. On Tuesday, I thought it was Thursday. So that tells you where I'm at right now. This is the PFF Forecast. We've got a fun one today. We're going to have Michael Gehlken of the Dallas Morning News on. He's going to talk some Cowboys. We're going to do some MVP odds, some Ravens stuff, some Lamar stuff. I want to open up with a little Russell Wilson, a little Monday Night Football. It should be a good one. So let's rock. Eric, where are you, by the way?
In a small town called Kendall, Wisconsin. This is where my
Your
brother-in-law
has changed.
My brother-in-law graciously allowed me to stay for a little bit in his second house. I had to separate our two children at some point. So,
you're rocking the quarantine beard, but you look oddly refreshed after the long trip. So I think that's a good sign.
The quarantine beard, we're like past the point where it's going to be easy to shave this off.
I mean, you're not shaving that. You have to trim it first. I've got quarantine hat, and I experienced last night something that is that I have not before, which is, can you eat too much fried rice? I think I met the limit last night. That was my quarantine experience for this week.
I have had an inordinate amount of fried rice during this break. But here's the thing, Kendall, Kendall is not reachable by DoorDash. So I'm in a little bit of a predicament here. I know. So
what are you cooking up? What's your specialty? If you had to make one meal to impress someone or feed yourself, what would it be?
Oh, to feed myself, probably like eggs, right? Gotta stay strong.
Scrambled, sunny side up.
Scrambled with like peppers and stuff in them.
Okay.
But if I had I don't know, I don't think I would try to make a meal to impress somebody.
Okay. Scrambled eggs. If you make scrambled eggs well, it should impress someone. Anyways, I was going to tell my scrambled egg story. I'm not going to do that. So I was trying to go to bed last night, and I saw that Chris Sims said Russell Wilson was offered for the number 1 pick in 2018. And I was trying to figure out, so this is the Seahawks offering Wilson up before his extension for the Browns number 1 pick they used to take Baker Mayfield. And I was trying to figure out which side is more ridiculous. The Seahawks offering up a top 5 quarterback,
offering it,
or the Browns turning it down.
It's a very good question, right? Because one of the things, at the time, the Seahawks were coming off of their first playoff-less season with Wilson, right? 2017, they went 9-7. They narrowly missed the playoffs. Wilson was coming off it was the transition to Brian Schottenheimer.
One of his worst seasons, yeah.
Yeah, transition to Brian Schottenheimer. That has a little bit of like a Packers Jordan Love flavor to it, doesn't it? Where they're like, well, we're going to run the football and control the clock, and they didn't realize that like having a quarterback that can bail you out of that dumb infrastructure is better, right? And the Packers will find this out when they fail with Jordan Love. But like it has a little bit of flavor to that. So I still think the Browns are dumber for turning it down, but I think the Seahawks are low key the worst for even offering it.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know. It's a real toss-up to me. I would say it's the Browns just because they have had such a maligned history, right? It's like you finally are given this break and you just turn it down.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to look back. And so I was looking at his grading here. That was his lowest graded season of the past 5 years. Now, from that point on, he's been fantastic. But the question really comes down to like, people have these rose-colored glasses about draft picks before they've played in the NFL. And this is a question I might ask Michael. Like I then thought about, what if the Cowboys had offered Dak for Joe Burrow? which is a much more extreme, I think, version of this, right? Because Dak's not as good as Russell Wilson, but maybe right now, relative to where Russell Wilson was in 2017, it's a little closer. I think Joe Burrow is viewed much more highly than Baker Mayfield is.
Yeah. Isn't
I
that
mean,
crazy?
people hated this idea. They think that the
Yeah.
Bengals would turn this down a million times. And I think it should be really close. I
Well,
don't
isn't
know.
this similar to our discussion the other day about Allen and Trubisky, and that the unknown
Yeah. The unknown is
is
huge.
more valuable to some people than the known
But
when the
there
known is
is
average?
the tough thing. The tough thing is I think there's a lot of unknowns still with Dak. You may have cut out on me there. I don't know.
Oh,
We'll
I can
fix
hear you
this in
now.
post.
Yeah.
I just think there's a lot of unknown still with Dak. So that is tricky, but it should be not a foregone conclusion that you would say the Burrow side is better.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the college to pro projections, Burrow's a little lower than Mayfield was after we did some adjustments for support and things like that. So, but we have 2 years of Mayfield, right? And those 2 years in a weird way curb obviously the our perception of him.
Yeah, no, that's fair. The Dak thing is tough because, and we'll talk to Michael about this, but there is still a decent amount of unprovenness, to it. And with Burrow, it's like you also have to weigh in what does it mean to have a guy start fresh with your organization? Like that means something to you financially. It means something to your fan base. That obviously isn't going to show up necessarily on the field. Now, if he's an average quarterback, does it matter? Like, does it matter that Andy Dalton was with the Bengals for however long and that he started with them? No, it doesn't. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's
At some point, no, it matters whether or not you win football games.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I stuck my neck out and said I don't think Dalton's the worst thing in the world if the Cowboys have to play ball next year. But
he certainly is. And I mean, I was talking to the Denver radio guys on KOA last night, and they were like, okay, so what's the question mark with the Broncos? It's like, well, it's the quarterback position. Like they've done a good job to say that this is the question mark now. It's for sure the question mark. But if you had Andy Dalton there, you'd feel so much better about the floor for that team. And the Cowboys certainly should feel that way. Like even if something bad happens to Dak this year, which is obviously something that could happen, you are in such a better situation.
Yeah, for sure. And that's I think. I mean, what's the we talked about the Los Angeles Chargers last week. Are the Broncos in a similar strait where they have support to the degree that if the quarterback doesn't hold up, it might end up being, I mean, we saw it with Cleveland too last year for a different reason. The head coach and the quarterback together failed and that team became dysfunctional relatively quickly. Are the Broncos in a similar position? And does a backup quarterback like Andy Dalton keep you from that? You saw it in Tennessee, right? Like, Mariota was garbage, right? Hot garbage for 6 weeks. Tannehill comes in and like you light a spark under that team, right? And that there's some value to that.
And one of the things that they brought up, which I thought was really interesting, is okay, but what happens if is it a bad thing to have a young quarterback comes out in his first game, maybe throws a couple of shaky passes, and then the fans maybe start to turn on him? And I go, no, that's the whole point. If you're that worried about that happening, that's why you bring in a backup quarterback.
Right.
Because if the guy can't handle quarter one of week one with a decent backup and throwing a bad pass, then he isn't going to handle any other high pressure situation very well.
Well, that was like the Tannehill contract when we're like, if you're already talking about how to get out, or the Cousins contract, if you're already talking about how to get out of it the day it's signed, did you really get a good deal?
I mean, this is a great point. let's do some Monday Night Football stuff. So there are odds on who is going to be the announcer game one of the 2020 NFL season.
I have not seen this.
Yeah, I posted it in our doc. So I'll read them to you here. So Sweet Lou Riddick plus 225 is the favorite, along with Dan Orlovsky at plus 225. Now, I want to start there. Which one would you rather have?
I have to maintain my poker face here.
Which one would you rather have?
No, I mean Louis Riddick is 100 times better than Dan Orlovsky, but I
agree with you.
Here's
Michael. What's going on? I agree with you.
Hey, Michael.
Hey guys, how you doing?
What's going on? We were just discussing the Monday Night Football announcer odds, and Orlovsky and Riddick are the two co-favorites.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do you have a strong preference either way?
I don't, honestly. It's almost embarrassing how little about their actual personal styles and broadcast experiences. I don't watch a ton of their television content. I usually just don't even watch much sports related TV when I can afford to. So yeah, no, I do respect Riddick a lot based on what I've seen from him, and I'm less familiar with Orlovsky.
The thing with Orlovsky is that they would have to show him running out of the back of the end zone, and I'm not sure he could withstand that. Michael, thanks for hopping on with us. It was funny. The last time that we spoke, we were talking about Mike McCarthy, and I was in a hotel room in Vegas, and I remember because we were talking about the conference that I was at, and it's so funny to think back on that now, given where we're at, given where Las Vegas is at right now, and how different times have changed in like a couple of months. Do you have any good quarantine habits that you've gotten into that we can start off with?
It's a great question. We got a dog in March, puppy. We rescued from a local Dallas shelter, and she's super cute, super fun. My fiance and I, we've had to make some adjustments to day-to-day life or just our plans in general. We were hoping to get married in July, but that California wedding is not. So the puppy's been a bit of a consolation prize for us throughout this whole thing. So going on lots of walks, getting my hands chewed up pretty good, all part of the daily routine around here.
I've had a couple of friends who have picked up puppies as well, and the results have been like overall positive, but not entirely. Like there are some who are like, yeah, I didn't realize it was this much work. And then of course Eric over here has kids, so it's like, puppy times 7.
Yeah. I got my wife and kids a dog because I was gone for the month of January and felt bad. And that was, I don't know. I don't dislike the dog, but like I certainly am not the biggest fan, but it makes them happy.
Who had more choice in the dog, you or the fiance?
I think it was a shared choice.
Okay.
Talked about a dog for a while, and my fiance's birthday is in March, so we kind of tied it into that as this being the right time, knowing that we're not going to have a lot of travel coming up with work. And to your guys' point, it's the dog is a lot of work, but I'm 32 years old. A lot of my friends are about that age where they have newborn children around the house that they're around all day, every day. And I find that I catch myself as not complaining about how much work this puppy is, because I have a good idea and respect for just how much more consuming it is to have a newborn child at home.
No, that's such a good point. I mean, look, we're close in age, and I have some friends that are in the same place, and every time I go on Instagram, I have the same thought, which is, wow, thank God that's not me right now. I have so much less work to do. It's great. All right, so you guys, you've been kind of lucky. The Cowboys have had a ton of interesting things to talk about this entire offseason. And I want to start with McCarthy because, when we spoke, it was about, hey, he's going to bring this new vibe to Dallas. He's going to do some things that are maybe a little more analytically forward thinking. Now we're in a situation where he's not able to have that kind of, on hands-on approach with the team. What's the vibe around him bringing the new culture to Dallas during a pandemic?
Well, I haven't spoken to Mike directly about this, but I can only imagine, based on conversations with him in the past, getting to know him a little bit at the combine, understanding his plan that he had in place, how much time he spent during the 2019 calendar year of just being away from the game and plotting for the type of head coach that he wanted to be, the type of things he wanted to instill upon his next opportunity, that this is frustrating. And obviously it's one of those frustrations that you have to be careful to express publicly, because you don't want to seem insensitive. You don't want to seem out of touch with everything that's happening in the world. Your lack of, your frustration pales into a lot of the other anguish that's happening elsewhere in this country, elsewhere in this world amid this public health crisis. But from a pure professional standpoint, this is not at all what Mike McCarthy envisioned. He envisioned standing in front of his players and delivering a message, being able to really map out what he wanted to achieve, the sort of tone he wanted to set. And, is he still doing those things? Like, say, for example, with the rookie draft class, where last week Mike McCarthy is part of this larger, Zoom WebEx type call, going through the expectations of the program and certain aspects of, what he wants from those rookies. He's still doing that, yes, but it's not quite the same when you are forced to do it while miles and miles, thousands of miles in some cases, away from these guys. It's not obviously what he wanted.
The Zoom thing,
that's a really good.
So
because a lot of these guys, most of them, right, are huge control freaks, and especially when this is the first time McCarthy's had to restart and given free reign of whatever he's wanted since 2006. So he was probably really looking forward to this, and we're one NFL event, the combine, into it, and it all sort of goes away, which has got to be frustrating for him. What's your read on sort of what's going on with Prescott right now? Like, why is the hang up, going into, now we're into May, probably get into June even before, we get any sort of serious movement on his contract?
Well, admittedly, hasn't been much play-by-play as it relates to, this is what we accomplished today or not accomplished today. We haven't talked since next date. I'm not getting that every day. But what I understood to be, for a while now, the separator between the two sides, a key separator, is the language specifically pertaining to lengths of the deal. I don't know if they've cleared this hurdle yet, or the Cowboys want a 5-year deal and Dak Prescott's agent Todd France want a shorter deal. It makes sense from both sides, where each is trying to navigate the evolving landscape of the NFL salary cap. And it's been for several years now, where there's been a pretty incremental jump of about $9 to $10 million each year in that salary cap. Well, with the new collective bargain agreement, which creates room for a 17th regular season game being added, it creates a new revenue stream through gambling that is entirely new in terms of shared revenue between the owners and the players. But really, that 17th game with the TV contracts, everyone close to the situation anticipates a pretty sizable jump in the years to come. Unclear if this COVID-19 situation changes that. Obviously, the revenue dynamic very well could be different this year, even though most of that money is tied into TV money. How many games are there? So all those intricacies aside, if you're Todd France and you expect the salary cap to really incline over the coming years, it behooves you to have your client re-enter the market as soon as possible, because max deal in 2020 with that salary cap will look a lot smaller compared to 2023, 2024, around the time that you want to re-enter negotiations.
Right. And do you think, is there also something to the fact that, there are a couple quarterbacks who are, entering their fourth year, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, where Dak is comparable, at least I think, to Watson. Is that slowing anything, and is there some pressure, I guess, in him sort of being possibly the first domino to fall among those players?
I don't believe it's slowing anything from the Cowboys side. They are eager to get this done. If they had their way, they would have gotten this done during the 2019 offseason. From CAA standpoint, from Dak Prescott standpoint, it could. I mean, I think they're very comfortable in general with playing this thing out. We've seen that thus far in this process. They're comfortable with a franchise tag north of $31 million in the state without any income taxes, state income taxes, that is. They're comfortable with Dak Prescott's endorsement money, with the insurance policy that he plays. He's pretty comfortable financially. And so although the two sides have until July 15th to reach a long-term agreement, I do think there's a chance a long-term agreement is reached before then. Dak Prescott really would be okay one way or the other. If he chooses to wait, the franchise tag will be available to him in 2021. And just, around we go as this whole situation plays out.
Well, that's the thing that I keep coming back to. So you look at it, and what you just said, it reiterates that Dak Prescott has the leverage. Like, he can sit there and say, hey, I'm going to make $31 million. I've got endorsements. Your backup option is Andy Dalton. Like, people are not going to be happy if Andy Dalton is the quarterback, 2 seasons from now. It's got to be me. And the way the franchise tag escalates, he would get 37, 38 next year. That's another great chunk of money. And then it would be something astronomical like 50. So if he just says, I'm willing to sit it out and wait, then he's getting, 31, 37, and then is a free agent in a year where the salary cap theoretically would be way higher and he could command a much bigger deal. And he has this great supporting cast around him. So it all comes back to the huge mistake was not getting this done last off season. And do you think there's a sense, like, to me, that's a huge blunder. Does anyone in Dallas, in the organization, feel that is a huge mistake, or they just think, oh no, it'll get worked out?
I think if they had their way, it would have gotten done, where there was an earnest effort to take care of Dak before the 2019 season. The Cowboys are very well aware of the financial realities surrounding the NFL, and specifically its salary cap. Jerry Jones, extremely in tune with CBA negotiations. He was flying to Chicago weekly. He was at the forefront of it. So if there was any NFL owner who knew you'd be wise to take care of these long-term deals today rather than push it down the road, it was Jerry Jones. And I think you look at what the Cowboys did last summer, they extended La'el Collins, their right tackle, who had a phenomenal 2019 season. They were ahead of that. They extended linebacker Jalen Smith. You could argue that wasn't the best idea. He had a down season, even though he made his first Pro Bowl, and there were other issues there behind the scenes. But nonetheless, the philosophy of going out and paying guys aggressively before you had to was all there. So I think the Cowboys envisioned as Dak Prescott being part of it. He exercised his right not to, and his contract will have more value this year if he gets the deal done than it would have had last year. He's effectively bet on himself and won. I think the Cowboys, though, have done a phenomenal job of surrounding Dak Prescott with talent. I mean, that cupboard is about as full as it is anywhere else in the league. Yeah. It's almost comical. And I know Dak Prescott wants to be not just an NFL starting quarterback or an NFL franchise quarterback or a highest paid quarterback. He wants to be the Dallas Cowboys quarterback. That building, that franchise, that locker room are all very, very important to him. So ultimately, I think this is a deal gets done, but this is part of the process when you're talking about a deal of this scale.
Yeah, I mean, from Dak's perspective, he, looking at this and going, hey, last year, and Eric and I talk about this all the time, like, the Cowboys got unlucky. Their regression should be back up to, like, the average for how good they were passing the football. Their record did not reflect that. And so if he's just smart in thinking about that, and he goes, hey, if I get this team to the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game, there is no way that my value doesn't increase by a lot. And so, with the CeeDee Lamb pick and Trayvon Diggs, who you wrote about, like those are great picks that help this team get better. And then you have that regression, and then you have Mike McCarthy. Like, it makes so much sense for Dak. I almost wonder, you said you think this deal gets done. It has to be on Dak's terms, though, right? Like, this deal is not getting done unless it's on his terms, right?
Without a doubt. Yeah, this is Dak's got to have to be comfortable with it. And ultimately, it's his voice and not his agent's, where he's going to have to be comfortable with whatever the structure is, whatever the APY is, whatever all the details are. It could be a situation where if you're Todd France, you say, you know what, I think we should just play this situation out even longer. Let's just go into the 2020 season under the franchise tag, and we'll circle around in 2021. And Dak could come around and say, you know what, no, let's just do this. Let's take care of it. I'm ready for this to be behind me. I'm just ready to go. So ultimately, it is Dak's call on whatever the situation, however it plays out, whenever it concludes, whenever it comes to that resolution. It's on Dak's terms.
There's really only one risk for Dak, right? I mean, if things go well in the NFL over the next 2-3 years, he's going to play it. If he plays it out like Kirk Cousins does, he's going to get a very good deal. I mean, I think the one risk is, he plays this season on the franchise tag, the salary cap contracts, and the franchise tag is too steep for Dallas to pay next season. But it's also a big deal is too heavy for the majority of the NFL due to contraction in the salary cap. I think that's a pretty low probability event, but that's got to be really the only thing right now that gives Dak Prescott pause. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Just the uncertainty of this current public health situation and not knowing exactly how that will affect the financial landscape in the immediate future. I think that's fair to say. And I'm sure that has been a focal point of where, his agents have, looked at the situation. It's probably been a main point of their focus is figuring out, try to project how this could impact the growth that otherwise would be expected in the salary cap. I still think even if it does contract, everyone around the league understands who Dak Prescott is and what he's proven thus far and where his trajectory lies. And the Cowboys certainly will have enough money one way or the other to take care of him. So I don't, like you said, probably not a huge chance of that being a real issue. And I would think that as part of Dak Prescott's insurance policy, unless it's just injury driven, there might be some language there that would even protect him for that.
You brought up a great point that I was thinking about, and we've talked about this a little bit. Do you get the sense that NFL players are taking the pandemic more or less seriously than maybe the average American is?
That's a great question. I think probably just as it does with, I'm sure, members of each of your families, where it very incredibly and almost frustratingly so. I wouldn't even say almost. There is pretty wide variance between how the average American views the pandemic. There are people who believe public health experts, and there are people who, I would say shockingly, but I think I've come to learn better, who don't. And ultimately, people have to do what makes them comfortable. And there's no state law that says you can't do this or you can't do that. But I think you see a lot of players who are really observing all the guidelines that have been recommended. And there are others who are having these training sessions where it's several of them getting together, doing a group photo afterward, put on Instagram, and like as if it was any normal year. And we all wish it was like any normal year, but obviously it's not. And tens of thousands of Americans have died from this, and tens of thousands of Americans more are projected to in the coming months. And so, I think some NFL players again are taking it very seriously, but others far less so.
I think that's well said. I mean, there have been people in the last, week or so that have said, I can't, media members, wish the NFL season wasn't happening. And it's like, that couldn't be further from the truth. We just want everybody to be safe.
Well, I wonder if Jerry saw, I wonder if Jerry saw, Zeke and Dak throwing a little party, and he said, you know what? maybe we'll get Andy Dalton in here just as a backup option. You never know. You never know what would happen. I mean, that could be. I was trying to think about this. I was asking Eric and I had a long conversation. Like, if you get into the NFL season and a quarterback gets COVID-19, that is there's no other sport where one player getting it, maybe LeBron on, the Lakers, right? But like, that's such a small case where that would just torpedo a team. But if you have, this is maybe the first year where there have been serviceable backups available. I mean, the Saints with Jameis Winston, if you have a guy that is actually a mid-tier starter that you can bring in, that is a massive advantage to your team. So I don't think that should be overlooked. I want to move on from Dak, but just your gut right now, it's what, a 4-year extension for Dak and it gets signed? That's where you put your money?
I think 4 or 5 year deal. Yeah. And I think if I was to say one way or the other, I would say it gets done, but do I feel super confident in that? No, I wouldn't say it's 90-10. I wouldn't say it's 80-20, probably not even 70-30. It's all a pretty fluid situation. And again, the play-by-play is something that isn't being produced really publicly. So don't know with confidence exactly how the scene's going to play out. But I would think, given everything that's going on surrounding the situation and knowing how much Dak Prescott wants to be part of this organization long term, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And it's more likely than not that this contract gets done by July 15th.
Probably easier to keep those things under the covers, given the current climate. There's so many other interesting things, though, going on with the Cowboys. What's the non-Dak story that you think is kind of the most important, has the biggest bearing, maybe 5-6 months from now, and we're looking at how successful the Cowboys have been?
I think there really are a few question marks on offense. I mean, you could talk about how they're less dynamic at a 12 personnel this year than they were a year ago. Their tight ends last year, were Jason Witten and Blake Jarwin. Now it's, Blake Bell and Jake Jarwin. And so there's an obvious drop off there. You talk about the center position being a question mark with Travis Frederick's retirement. In the interior line, including left guard, needing to work itself out. But all that said, I think I'll be looking at the defense, which needs to produce more turnovers, which has a new scheme under Mike Nolan, as a very young cornerback group that needs to come together. You got Chido Awuzie, cornerback, who likely be moving to safety. Communication is so important on the back end of the defense. You got a lot of new guys, a lot of young guys who aren't getting those reps right now in the spring to come together. And I think that is going to be a challenge for that group to come together. What does defensive end look like? Has Alden Smith been reinstated? Probably. Has Gregory been reinstated? Probably. But what do those two look like? It's been a long time since we've seen either of them, in particular, of course, Alden Smith. So special teams has to get better. John Fassel, the new special teams coordinator via the Los Angeles Rams, he was brought in to help achieve that. But, there's a lot of need for improvement that goes beyond simple coaching. There's some real personnel inadequacies that were exposed over the entirety of last season. When people ask, well, why were the Cowboys with all this talent on offense, some pieces on defense, why were they, a middling team that never could get over the hump and didn't make the postseason despite a weak NFC East? Special teams was a huge part of that conversation. So offense is what we talk about. We talk about Dak Prescott. We talk about CeeDee Lamb. We talk about Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. We talk about all these guys, and rightfully so. That's where the investment on this roster is. But in terms of what we'll actually be talking about critically and with the areas of this roster that really need to improve for this Cowboys season to be different than the last Cowboys season, it's defense, it's special teams.
That's fascinating you say that, because the McCarthy quote, that came out about how we're gonna have to outscore teams. You go, oh, they've got a lot of talent on defense, but then you mentioned all those different things, the communication, the new scheme, the fact that no one's able to get on a football field together right now, and you go, oh man, maybe we're gonna see something that looks more like the Kansas City Chiefs from a couple of years ago, where they had to outscore teams to win games. Then we will maybe the more traditional balanced, Dallas teams that we've seen in the past when they've had success. The special teams, Eric, you've been harping on that, and the Cowboys being so bad with special teams last year. You were all about that.
Yeah, John, Fossil is one of the best coordinators in the league, in terms of looking at, where the Rams have ranked on special teams over the course of the last 4, 5, 6 years. That to me is a terrific hire. I think it's one of the reasons the Rams might, be low key really bad this year, beneath what people think, but it's a very good get for, Dallas. I'm not sure about Mike Nolan. I mean, Nolan, George, you're a 49ers fan. You have fond memories of Mike Nolan, but having him come over, and help out, the defense, defense is tricky year to year because I think Byron Jones, losing him is tough. Trayvon Diggs is possibly a good replacement, but I do agree with McCarthy that if they want to, sustainably win football games, they have to score. And a lot of that is scoring is being better in the red zone, being better in the kicking game, and not getting unlucky. I mean, Dak getting injured, right before the last Philadelphia game is something that people, forget about, but it was a huge part of them not winning the division.
Yeah, Trayvon Diggs is probably, real quick, the rookie in the NFL rookie who has maybe the best situation right now, where he is bunked up with his brother, Stephon Diggs, Buffalo Bills wide receiver, of course, bunked up in Florida, and just the ability to go against your brother every single day and talk releases, talk leverages, talk other aspects of route running intricacies. This is a bit of a camp for becoming an NFL, top caliber type of cornerback. And obviously, these guys have talked football plenty over the course of the past years. They've looked at film together. I mean, very much a fatherly relationship that Stephon has with new Cowboys rookie Trayvon Diggs. But I think that, as well as anybody, he's pretty well situated here during all of this, shutdown across the NFL.
Yeah, that's such a good point, man. The difference in how this pandemic has created, it's stretched the difference in people's lives, right? If you have a situation that you can take advantage of, it's exacerbated that, and the other way as well, right? If there are guys out there that don't have, like me, for example, access to nice gym equipment, I'm here, doing random stuff, and guys that have a situation where they can take advantage of another NFL player that they're quarantining with. I didn't even think of that. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's no different than what is happening from a child education standpoint in this country, where economical divide between certain neighborhoods, between certain students, has been exacerbated by, what is your in-home learning infrastructure right now? If you're someone from an affluent neighborhood, you're having these video calls, you're having these conversations with your teachers, you're having this. Meanwhile, if you're a child who doesn't have that technology at home, who is reliant on public food programs, you're unstable from a food standpoint. I mean, everything is just more challenging, and then there's this divide that happens. It's a crisis, and obviously, and that goes beyond sports. But I like to look at, when does something that's happening in sports reveal shine a light into what's happening outside of sport. It happens all the time between social issues or other aspects of society. And so I think this is one of those.
Do you think, that's a really good point. Do you think, so taking what we know about education, which is one of the biggest reasons for inequity isn't what happens in the classroom, it's what happens between June and August, right? And now it's March through August. Do we think, so going into the 2020 NFL season, or even just in a general offseason, is the biggest difference in coaching not necessarily seen, like, you think about Jason Garrett, sometimes he was, a huge boob on the field, right? But like those teams won, more games than they lost, is what's happening in between, is stability from February to August, February to July in an NFL team, is that more important necessarily than what happens on the field when you're trying to evaluate a coach or a program infrastructure?
It could be, if I understand right. the teams with new head coaches, it sure is a great offseason to have stability on your coaching staff.
Yeah.
If you're Bill Belichick and you're going through this as an organization, you're better positioned to handle all of this because of the infrastructure in place. And so I think it will be interesting, and we'll see what this season looks like. I mean, we always talk about how after the NFL schedule comes out, you have your predictions, or all these beat reporters assign predictions to their team. If you got them all up, it's up there above 500. Everyone's optimistic overall about how their team's going to play. This year is unique because every schedule prediction where the wins and losses add up to 16 is an inherently optimistic prediction. We don't know what this year is going to look like. If we get the type of year that will allow us this data, I think it'll be interesting to review how did the new head coach run organizations do compared to others with a little bit more, just stability, and how does that compare to prior seasons? I think that would be a phenomenal study if you have the opportunity.
Well, you guys, actually, Eric and I were both, teachers, and I taught I did Teach for America, and so I saw exactly what you guys were just talking about, and it brings up a really interesting point as well, which is not just the coaching, but the ownership structure and what state is that team in. Like, those things are going to contribute, I think, as well, where it's like, okay, if this team has their stuff together, and I think of the Cowboys as being kind of the top of that list, right? They have this great infrastructure. They've got an owner that is well equipped to do anything that needs to be done. And then you could go look at teams on the other side of that, which might be the Chargers, which might be, the Chargers might be the one that really comes to mind because they're in California, a state that has been way more rigorous. They have way less of that resource. And will that be something that ends up shining a light on which organizations are more successful next year? Just the ability to put an environment around the team to get together.
So here's a question. So speaking of the Cowboys infrastructure, we've been having these, cocktail happy hours at PFF, and we got what amounted to an amazing story by our boss, Chris Collinsworth, about Jerry Jones and his yacht. And that got us to think, what's your best or favorite Jerry Jones story so far?
So far being the key phrase, because I started covering the Cowboys in late August of last year. And so this was aimed to be the first full off season where I would cover the Cowboys. And, certainly training camp, there probably were going to be some, and still could be some Jerry Jones stories to come. Thus far, I lack the goods, I think, in this department, but I do one thing that does come to mind is something that's different than other teams that I've covered, where I covered the Chargers for 7 years in San Diego before their relocation. I covered the Raiders for 2.5 years, stopping a few months before their move, is just the vast resources and everything that he pours into the organization, Jerry Jones. And so at the Combine, after the NFL agents discussed the collective bargaining agreement proposal, Jerry Jones invites all the beat writers onto this Cowboys bus, this multi-wheeler thing. And it's, it goes on for 2 hours, and he opens it by just talking about CBA very bluntly, very forthcomingly, was very open about the particulars, and then pivots to talking about the roster. And again, like a 2-hour session that is highly unusual. You don't see that, I feel, with the 31 other clubs. And so it's just different here. It's different where Jerry Jones, he's involved in meetings. He's involved in the Zoom calls before the draft with players. He's involved in just about every aspect of this organization, and he needs to be, because he pushes the Cowboys brand. He's on the radio multiple times a week after games, and obviously this is going to change this year if there is post-game locker room. He talks to reporters, and if you see a photo of us, there's about 30 men and women just herded around him, asking questions. And this is right before the locker room opens. And then when the locker room opens, some of us peter out, and then Jerry just keeps going. He keeps talking for about 20, 25 minutes. And so just the scope of his visibility, I think reflects the visibility that this franchise has come to have over the course of decades.
The cool thing, and is another thing that we talk about a lot, is like caring matters. And certainly people can catch flack for caring a lot, but you'd rather have someone care than not. And like that can go a long way. I think that's the thing that really stuck out to me there. I got to ask you though, because we've seen the outside of this bus parked in front of Prime 47 in Indy every single night of the combine. Give me some glimpse inside. Like, what's the coolest thing in there? What does it remind you of? Is it like his yacht? What's inside the bus?
It's a nice bus, but it's also an RV. Like, it's very much, you don't walk in there and feel like it's like you're in
not a school bus.
Yeah, it's it's an RV. I don't know. Maybe I missed out on the decadence of it all. I didn't properly process it when I was first aboard. It was my first bus ride after all. Actually, it wasn't truly a ride. We just boarded it and then we boarded off. I mean, I'm boarded when it was over. Yeah, and I wish I could tell you there was something especially memorable. I mean, there were probably stars everywhere, which is to be expected. Yeah, that's all I got for you.
I'll go with stars everywhere. I'm envisioning the like kids room where they've got like the constellations, like glow stars on the top.
Go
like
that,
but with diamonds maybe.
This is I would say one of the more storied franchises in the history of pro sports. And you, like you said, you started covering them, late in the off season, or actually, training camp last year. If you were allowed to cover one other Dallas Cowboys season, which would it be? Retroactively.
Boy. So when I was making the drive in August from Bay Area, California to North Texas, upon taking this job, I felt stressed because there was so much history covered with the Cowboys organization. And although I had a passing knowledge of, the teams in the 90s and some of the great teams before, I didn't have anywhere near the type of institutional knowledge that others on the beat naturally would have and that fans themselves would have. And so I got an audio book of, I think it's Boys Will Be Boys. It's tales of Cowboys teams from like the 90s, and hearing about the White House, hearing about Michael Irvin, scissors in a barbershop. And I don't know if it's the team I most want to cover or least want to cover, kind of mixed feelings. But I think the team that I most wanted to cover, because I think it was just very much the height of the recent organization's, rise. I would probably say that would be the season. Take your pick on which one. Give me the Dion one. But I think that's very, very. That would have been a very interesting team to cover.
That's the right answer.
That's the transition from Jimmy Johnson to Barry Switzer, the Deion Sanders, the Jerry Jones being sponsored by Nike when the league wouldn't let him. I think the Dallas Cowboys are fascinating. I mean, all the way, and I'm glad that they continue to be so.
There's I forget who posted this, but it was a Deion Sanders, Jerry Jones commercial.
Yeah.
It's like a pizza commercial or something like that. And I can't imagine an owner and a star player being in a commercial today. Like, it was a good commercial. It was funny too. It was a different time back then. I have to ask you this. So I'm a California guy. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, I went to school and lived in Southern California. You've worked in both places. Power rank Northern California and Southern California.
It's tough because there are subcategories. Mexican food, I would take without a doubt. San Diego, which is where I'm from. I would take San Diego over Oakland or San Francisco. Not that there aren't some gems to be found, but I will not argue this.
That's fair.
Weather, I would probably say San Diego, Southern California as well. Bay Area is very cool. all year long. It's you'll need a jacket, whereas in San Diego, certainly you really can't complain about the weather.
Shirts optional.
Possibly, yeah, it's about as good as it possibly gets. I think I like the speed of the Bay Area better, where there's a lot of industry, a lot of opportunity there. Cost of living, you can give to Southern California, give to San Diego specifically. But I think that the pace of the Bay Area I really enjoyed, where there's just all these different startup companies. There's that entrepreneurial spirit, and then there's these tech giants that are all there, and it's fun to be a part of that. And so I love San Diego when it is home, but I couldn't think of a place that would feel more like home to transition out of San Diego than the Bay Area, where my sister lived. I went to college at UC Davis. A lot of college friends were there. I have no negative things to say about the Bay Area. Cost of living.
Yeah, the cost of living is a lot. I would power rank it very similarly. All the things you mentioned are correct. What has stuck out to me of late is I used to always think the Bay Area's food scene was so much better, with the exception basically of Mexican food, it was just up there in importance. But it has started to even out in a way that I now think Southern California, San Diego has gotten a lot more good places. Los Angeles has had this huge restaurant boom. When you combine the weather, the cost of living, and now the food, I have a really hard time putting the Bay Area anywhere near my most desired place to live. But you bring some good perspective there. It's important to remember there are good things about other places than Southern California, right, Eric?
I like Southern California. I've never been to the Bay Area, so that's a bucket list. Maybe
neither can hold a candle to Cincinnati, really.
No,
is what we're
for
getting
sure.
at.
Or rural Wisconsin, where I'm currently at.
Michael, this has been a lot of fun. Can you tell us, pimp some of the stuff you're working on right now and where everyone can go find and read all of your good stuff?
Golly, I'm not working on as many things as I would like. There's a lot of attempts to make things work, trying to do different profiles on different rookies, trying to do other aspects of just covering the situation as it stands. But it's a time where not a lot of people want to be out in the forefront talking about those things. And so I'm definitely, every day is going to be a product of my true drive to create content year round. And I'm actually quite proud of the work that we're doing at the Dallas Morning News, where our website is being continually populated, which is a challenge, again, for those reasons. I just did a Mother's Day story on Trayvon Diggs, his mom, Stephanie, mother of 5. Trayvon was 10 years old when his father died, and just how they took on the challenge of not always having the mom around because she was doing these 18-hour shifts that sometimes would be extended overnight, and she'd be in a hotel room because of being snowed in or what have you. They're eating syrup sandwiches, which is just exactly what it sounds like, with a bunch of syrup soaked into it, and that was what they would use to hold them over until mom got home, and she called 11 p.m. Hey, you guys want some McDonald's? I can come by and fix them. So they had it was I was joking with her, like, how did you come to have 2 NFL athletes come out of a home where it was syrup sandwiches and McDonald's at 11:30 p.m. And she joked, she laughed. It's not what we had every night, but that was kind of a little taste of what their life was like, and just how they struggled and pushed through. So those are the type of stories that are out there, especially after a draft. There's a lot of opportunity to help people get to know about these guys, their road to the NFL. So that's my focus. As well as cover other aspects of this organization, of this team, as it works its way through an obviously extremely unusual and difficult time.
Trayvon Diggs, one of our darlings, great pick, and the ability to go read more about and learn more about what these guys are like as human beings is awesome. That's one of the things we can get out, try and make in the most out of this time, going out and learning about the other aspects of life that normally during the rat race we just don't get to. So that was a fantastic piece. Everyone listening should go check it out. Michael, thank you for hanging out with us, and stay safe over there. Give the puppy some good love, and keep it going, man. Thanks, brother.
My pleasure, guys. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Michael Gehlken of the Dallas Morning News, guy is a rock star. And obviously, as you can tell, I mean, he went from Chargers to Raiders to Cowboys. That's a pretty steep ascent.
Was Raider, yeah. That's it was really interesting. You know, a lot of the things that he was saying about Dak. Have we given the team too much power in our discussions?
I think so. I think
it
so.
Sounds like it.
That was my really salient takeaway from what he said on the Dak discussion was, this is Dak. Like this, and to me, this is why the Cowboys' biggest failing last offseason was not saying, hey, come hell or high water, we're coming out of this offseason with Dak. Now, I don't know if Dak is just so shrewd that he said, actually, no, like there's no way that I'm signing a deal that is anything less than everything I want because I can see where things are going, which would be really cool. I doubt that's how it happened. I feel like it was probably more luck, but it seems to me like the Cowboys just really missed out on signing him last offseason.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, he improved drastically, right? There's a significant narrative that he was going downward at the time, and you know we joked he was the Dak up quarterback. The information was less complete than it is now, and you know I'm still a little bit nervous if I'm Dallas about giving him that big of a contract, which is why I think they're balking at it. But it's interesting to know that the feeling is that it's Dak's world and we're all living in it.
That's what I came away with from. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was the defensive side of things. And we're going to talk about some props here in a second, but it seems increasingly the case that this is going to be a team driven by offense and a lot of it. And Mike McCarthy, if you read into any of the things about him becoming more progressive, and you look at what the Cowboys were last year, which was Kellen Moore taking advantage of play action, a lot more throwing on second and long, which is one of the big inefficiencies in the NFL. Like this team should be scoring a lot of points. There should be a lot of overs hit. There should be a lot of passing yards to be had. Those would be kind of some of the things that I think maybe we were keen on, but maybe not as keen on as we should have been.
Yeah, I think so. I thought that the interesting thing that he brought up was John Fossil, or was it Jim? No, Jim Fossil's his dad.
Jimmy. John
Fossil's the special teams coordinator, because we've been harping on that as a source of bad luck / bad process for them. And it's and it just shows that the lengths to which Dallas will go. We talked about, with the Los Angeles Rams, when McVay took over, he signed a bunch of players like Robert Woods. He got, Wade Phillips, and he kept Fossil, who was the interim coach when Jeff Fisher was canned, and they were sort of doing what it took. And I think like McCarthy, in some sense, with the more Fossil, I'm not sold on Mike Nolan, but let's, like he's kind of taking doing what it takes, which I think if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, has to leave you optimistic. Maybe not for this. Well, who knows about this season, but like long term, that's a good process for them.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. John Fossil, the point about the Rams suffering from losing John Fossil was just another great reminder that the Rams, they're going
to suck. The Rams season win total.
Crazy how
I have like basically the most I'll ever bet on anything on the Rams under 9 wins.
Which is what's the juice on that, right?
Well,
now?
So I got it early in the offseason. I think the juice was like minus. I ended up with like minus 115, maybe minus, and now it's 8 flat. I was on with Evan Silva and Adam Evan Silva and Adam Leviton, and it was 8, and I still would take under 8, but I would not. Obviously that, when I saw them hanging 9 on that team, I just couldn't believe it when I saw it. The loss of a ton of defensive players, the loss of Wade Phillips, the loss of Fossil, and I think Zerline left too, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. The kicker. If your quarterback's Jared Goff, you need good special teams, you need good defense, and in that division, like it'd be interesting. I want to see what the prop is on them finishing last place in the division, but I think it'd be plus price, and I think it'd be a good bet.
Let's talk. We didn't have the full Monday Night Football discussion, which I just want to circle back to real quick. Pat McAfee is plus 300. That means there's a chance. We're saying
there are people who don't like Pat McAfee, but he is terrific.
Of course. There are people that don't like Louis Riddick and Dan Orlovsky.
There are people who don't like Chris, who's the best in the business, right? I mean, but the Pat McAfee was making Temple versus Toledo games on like Thursday nights seem exciting. And, he's really good. What's really fun about him is we talked about when the XFL was like putting in the gambling stuff, and and it was like Steve Levy was like, and look, the under is a lock now. It's like third quarter and there's only like 7 points on the board. And it's like, that's not really like,
whereas,
it's just not what people care like to listen to. But like McAfee, there was a game where Temple was like minus 6.5. And the only reason I knew it because I bet Temple, and they were up 10 with like 4 minutes left, and there was a rain delay. And McAfee during the rain delay is going on and on and on about what this means. And he did it in such a clever way that he didn't mention gambling. But anybody who had money on the game knew exactly that was what he was referring to. And of course, the game restarts, and the team against Temple, I can't remember who it was, got through the back door, lost by 3, got the ball back, and Temple gets a fumble return on the last play of the game for a touchdown, and McAfee's going crazy but the whole time not discussing that. It's like he didn't mention the bets at all. I mean, he's really smart. I would say that he would be. I would think in terms of replacing Booger, he'd be somebody who, from an entertainment perspective, that I would go with, and he would be, I think, far sharper at like talking about the game.
Here's the thing: you brought up 2 great points. The first is, what you are looking for in a play-by-play guy and a color guy is some entertainment, some added entertainment value. And Louis Riddick and Dan Orlovsky are going to the average fan, sound like they know a lot about football, and that's great. But no one is tuning in to hear their football analysis. If you're going to make the game elevated a little bit, bring someone that brings some entertainment, and that's McAfee. And then the second point, which I think the bigger one, is the second you make something legal, and gambling's like, hey, go talk about gambling. It's not cool anymore. What's cool is Al Michaels referencing it in a way that is funny. That's what's cool. So if the NFL...
Or sad, but yes, entertaining nonetheless.
It's entertaining. Now, yes, it's sad for some of us in certain situations. But the NFL may have lucked into the situation where they have this kibosh on referencing gambling overtly, which they should keep, but they should give a little push, a little bump to people that are going to talk about it in funny ways. That is what is entertaining. It's not entertaining for some guy to be moaning and whining about the over, or the under, or the spread, or all this stuff.
Or just like earmarking it like, hey, here it pops up on my Google Calendar during the game, right. Talk gambling, right? Like that's not really what we want. But what we want is somebody like Pat who's got a G on the game, and when he's got like $1,000 on over 46 and a team drives all the way down to the 1 yard line and kicks a field goal, we want him on tilt. That's what we want during a game, right?
Yep. It'd be great. I was excited to see that he was plus 300, because that means there's a chance. And
if you had him, so here's the thing. And I think Louis Riddick's really smart. I think, he's got a ton of experience with the right people. Mm-hmm. I think he's a little bit too serious. Mm-hmm. Like he's very direct. He's very like, he's very matter of fact in the booth,
He takes
and
himself
that generally plays
super
well.
seriously. Yeah.
Yes, that was the way I wanted to, And in a course of, like, if you're watching 7 college football games from like Thursday to Saturday night, he's fine because he's, you get your McAfee one time, you get your Ross Tucker the other time, you get your Lewis Riddick, and it's kind of a nice diverse group. If it's Monday Night Football, like I need to put somebody next to him that is more like Pat McAfee.
Yeah.
Right. That will sort of yin yang with him than I
That's
do
brilliant.
Dan Orlovsky, who I don't actually think, like, my issue with Dan Orlovsky is I think he tries to take himself seriously, but tries to be goofy and isn't really good at either. And it's just like kind of a mess. And, it's fine when he's like announcing UConn football on like Friday night, but it's not like, to me, Monday Night Football is, you can't screw this up. And if you go Riddick and McAfee, I'm sold.
Brilliant.
Especially if the play-by-play person lets the thing breathe.
Orlovsky is trying to be Lewis Riddick. Like that's like he, and you want different personalities.
You want Bruce Gradkowski in that case.
Yes. I don't think so. I don't think a 3-man booth works very well, to be honest with you.
Right.
But
Chris has said as much to us.
Yeah. But if you're going to do one, have it be guys that are different. So Chris mentioned it. It was really interesting. He was like, the reason it was tough was I've got Troy and I've got me, and the producer's like, okay, Troy, you take this one. And so he's talking to Troy, and there's no conversation amongst all parties involved. It's very like kind of cut off. But if you said, hey, McAfee, you're not going to be doing like serious replays, and you're here to do something different than Lou is, then those conversations can be all interwoven because you don't need to like ignore one person to talk to the other. And so I think it could work if you had a play-by-play guy who was really good at what he did and knew this dynamic well. I think it could work. That would be ideal. You've stumbled upon the ideal situation. Good job by you. Okay, we're going to do a couple of things quickly here before we peace out. The first is some MVP odds, some quick reaction to that, and then I want to talk about little Lamar Jackson. So per Caesar's Palace, Mahomes plus 400.
The
Lamar
real
Jackson,
Caesar's Palace, or just
the real one? I had to mention it, which is currently empty. It's only Caesar in there. He's quarantining by himself. Lamar Jackson is plus 650. Dak Prescott is 9-1. Russell Wilson is 12-1. Tom Brady 16, and Kyler Murray 16-1. Drew Brees 20-1. Aaron Rodgers 25-1. Deshaun Watson 28-1. Of that group, which one is most appealing to you?
The two worst bets are Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray.
Yes.
Right? Like
Without
Lamar's getting the boost from being the previous one. Kyler Murray at 16-1 is just way too heavy. I will, if I get odds of 10-1 or more, I will bet Russell Wilson to win the MVP every single season until he retires.
So
that's the best bet.
I thought that was going to be the one that you liked the most, and I also think Dak at 9-1 is also a little crazy because if they have an amazing season, yeah, he could put up some very good stats, but there's so much around it that also contributes, right? Like he has 3 great receivers. Mike McCarthy comes in. Like Mike McCarthy is going to win Coach of the Year before Dak Prescott wins MVP.
Yeah, but I don't think, like, the last time a non-quarterback won the MVP was 2012. Sure. It hasn't been anybody but a quarterback or a running back for 2 decades. And
right. I'm not saying that I'm just saying that they could have a great season and he still wouldn't get enough MVP pub because there's the other factors on that team that are important.
But do you think that that's real though? Because like Lamar Jackson, you can make the exact same argument for, and I think Patrick Mahomes
not in the public's eye. Not in the public's eye. Look,
so you think the public is just lower on Dak than everybody else?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
okay.
Lamar Jackson's numbers. So the reason we have a different view, we see running the football as a team thing. The public doesn't. The public thinks that when Lamar Jackson runs the ball, it's 1 on 11.
Yeah. No.
Don't
my thing is
I'm agreeing with you and disagreeing with you at the same time.
If Dallas
skill.
My thing is if Dallas wins 13 games, I think that Dak will get a significant boost in probability of winning the MVP. And if they win 13 games, it's not going to be because of it's going to be because Dak has leveraged all the weapons around him and not because of Zeke. Like, I think Zeke is somebody who I think the public's sillily, gave a ton of credit to early, but I think they're souring on him a little bit. And, I don't know, 9-1 to me doesn't seem heavy enough. Which is why I always prefer Wilson at 12, but
Okay, the one that that sticks out to me, in addition to Russell Wilson, is Drew Brees at 20-1. And he has been so close. Obviously, Mahomes had a year of all years, and there is, I think Tom Brady suffers from this a little bit, which is like, I'm kind of tired of Tom Brady, but everyone is in love with Drew Brees. To me, Drew Brees at 20-1 and Russell Wilson at 12-1 would be the two that stick out to me.
Brees is yet to win one.
Right.
And I think that there might be some bias towards first timers if they're not like the 7-timers like Brady and Manning and Favre and stuff. So that's a good one. I'm a little lower on the Saints though. Here's a question that might be a terrible transition to what we're about to talk about, but a good one. I think the Saints.
You got somewhere to go?
No, but I think the Saints lean into Kamara as a player this season, and yes, and I think it's going to be a frustrating affair for people.
Okay, I'm curious. Why do you think that? Because I have a reason why they would do the opposite.
Well, I think that they're going to let him go in free agency, and I think they're going to try to get the most out of him before letting him go. Wow. And I also think that they look at what happened a season ago and said, well, we were successful offensively, but in the playoffs we couldn't get anything done, and we couldn't get anything done because Brees, asking Brees to throw too much is not a good thing. And the league tends to try to yo-yo back towards the run when things go wrong. And I think that they're going to try to, and Kamara's going to be healthy, right, for the first time in 2 years and stuff. I think they're going to lean into him a little bit, which is not good for Brees, I guess, in his MVP sort of push.
Okay. I think that's a great reasoning. Here would be my counterpoint to that, is that Kamara was hurt last year, and to me, they're going, okay, look, we got to win a Super Bowl this year. And if we're going to do that, we've got to have our aces healthy down the stretch. Now, the Brees one is at the forefront, right? But you go down the road and you go, okay, well, Kamara also, and I've just pronounced his name 2 completely different ways in back-to-back sentences.
Fair.
Is also important to us because of his receiving capability, because we need to leverage him in addition to Michael Thomas as a weapon for teams to be worried about. So where it leaves me is actually what they're going to do is Taysom Hill is going to be out there a lot. Now, this has the same impact.
I can't do this.
This has the same impact on the team of what you just described, which is less Brees throwing. But I could see it being not more carries for Kamara, but being way more run for Taysom Hill, offensive weapon, which would be incredible.
Matt, our buddy Matt, booked me on a fantasy football show in New Orleans yesterday, and so I'm sitting here trying to answer.
Matt Stofsky.
I know, and I'm trying to tell them why Taysom Hill is not going to score 8 touchdowns again next year. Now you're telling me he's going to be the bell cow.
I mean,
I brought up Mike Sellers.
Me.
Mike Sellers one year had 12 catches and 7 touchdowns for the Redskins. And my friend Mark Borichter had 20 catches and 8 touchdowns one year. Taysom Hill last year had 22 targets and 6 touchdowns. And I'm like, that just doesn't it's not going to happen again. Like that's just, either they're going to give him a ton more play, which you think they're going to do, which the dollars and cents suggest
Dollars say
do,
they will.
Or they could just make him into Matthew Slater, or he'll just regress. But I think you're going to see a little bit of both. I do think he'll get a decent amount of run as a receiver, tight end, running back, but he won't be that productive. And the end result will be what we both think.
So the ace in the hole that I think they have is a phantom Drew Brees injury, where he doesn't actually get injured, but Jameis Winston comes in and plays 3 to 4 games, and that helps Drew Brees
I'm here
bit.
For it, man.
Like I don't know why you wouldn't do that.
Here's what I'll say. And again, like we think of it here, and the 2019 season's a bit of an aberration, but I'm just gonna go with it anyway. Here's Drew Brees' attempts per season: 2016, 673. 2017, 536. 2018, 489. And then last season, 378. Probably actually an uptick per game. Actually clearly an uptick per game. But the evolution of that offense has been towards passing less. The sacks he's taken per season: 27, 20, 17, and then 12. So it's an interesting situation for them. But I do think that they've been sneakily leaning off Brees a little bit.
You've moved me significantly off. I still think 20-1 is decent, given that
21 is a good bet, and
given that Kyler Murray is 16-1.
Well, and Tannehill made the Pro Bowl last year with 270 something attempts. Like right. we're smart enough where like efficiency matters to us as a league body now, but I do think he's not going to throw 50 touchdowns this year. Like it's just not going to happen. So when he's competing with guys like Mahomes and Watson and Lamar with the 40 something touchdowns, like it's going to be harder for him to win the MVP with those types of statistics.
Speaking of a team that's going to lean into the run, your Chiefs are going to, and that's going to hurt Mahomes, of course, and his 4-1 chances to win the MVP.
Yeah, Mahomes at 4-1 is a bad bet. As much as he's the best player in the NFL, it's not.
As much as he's awesome. Okay, but let's talk Lamar, and let's talk the Ravens here. And let's start with the Ravens win total at 11.5. So Lamar is plus 650 to win the MVP. He is not a player that either of us are going to bet on to win the MVP, despite I love Lamar Jackson, right? But some of the reasons why the Ravens win total 11.5 is interesting is how that team is constructed and the different things that went right for them that, unlike, say, the Kansas City Chiefs, are not as reproducible as quickly. And so their win total is 11.5. Our simulation has them winning a full game under that. Are you buying into it?
Yeah, there's so many things that have to go right to win 12 games in the NFL. And that's why almost every single win total that's, the only way that you've gone broke betting under win totals like that is if you bet the Patriots. And there's certainly room to suggest that the Ravens could be a sort of a new Patriots. But I think there's so much uncertainty associated with Lamar Jackson. Almost all of it is left tail at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And they go 11-5. We're perfectly happy. They probably win the AFC North, and you go under that bet, right? There's a ton of situations where this is a significant decline for them. From an outcome perspective, if not a fundamental one. And so I really do like the under here. I think Timo did a good job of explaining the reasoning, and not to say we're not, the hard part about this is we're not rooting for them to go under. We're just saying that, if you're a betting person, over is not the right play, and in fact under's probably has a decent amount of edge.
Yeah, what you said that's key is the Ravens can be good again and win 11 games and have a successful season. And that tells you why under 11.5 is a smart bet, because when you say to yourself, yeah, a really successful season means that they don't cash this bet, then you're probably onto something. And here are the things with the Ravens that are important to think about. The first is so much of their success was, obviously driven off of the run game. They had the most efficient run game by a mile. And we know that that's not as dependent on one player as, say, the passing game is. It's dependent on a lot of players doing their job well. Now, Lamar Jackson is special, absolutely, but that needs to be taken into consideration. And we'll talk about his rushing in a second. The other piece of this is they had a lot of situational components that worked really well for them. They were absolutely fantastic on 4th and shorts. They made the decision to go for them, yes, but they were fantastic in them as well. And a little more variance there could mean, like we saw against Tennessee, that they have a few more situations where early in the game those don't go their way. And as a result, they spend more time playing from behind. They were the only team in the NFL last year, I couldn't really believe this, that ran fewer than 100 plays in the first half of games when trailing. They ran 94. The next closest was the Saints at 140, 137. So a little bit of regression there, and all of a sudden you are asking Lamar Jackson to do some things that are harder. Not that he's going to be worse, but you're asking him to do things that are harder. Yeah. And that means that they might not be quite as dominant as they were a season ago. They're not creeping up on anyone either. That's another important thing, is people are spending their off seasons at home doing nothing, trying to figure out how to stop Lamar Jackson and the Ravens.
Yeah, and I wrote an article last week about his rushing prop, which is, I think it was 999.5, and it's gone all the way down to 935.
Yeah, I checked it. So before we did the podcast, I had to check to make sure it hadn't gone down again. It is, in fact, still 935 and a half.
Which I think is actually, I worked through some hashtag math on the reasoning for that. I do think that's probably the right number. But you think about the sort of things that they're going to do offensively. They're going to run the football more with running backs, which for the Ravens is better than the average team. But for the Ravens, it's worse than probably throwing or running with Lamar. The other thing is he had a lot of yards before contact. How does that change when Marshall Yanda retires and they don't have quite as sturdy of an offensive line in front of them? As you said, they played a lot with a lead, and Lamar, interestingly, had the majority of his rushing yards on scrambles with the lead. And it's weird to think about that, because, in the playoff game, we remember him running wild when they were, working from behind. But there's dynamics when you're behind as well, where you're basically playing the run, and then you're playing man coverage on the back end. And, a quarterback like Lamar can really screw you with a run when your DBs have their back turned, right? And so if they're playing more straight up games, maybe they're allowed a spy, or maybe they're allowed to play zone in front of Lamar when the game's more head up, because a score doesn't mean you go from being down 7 to being down 14, all that kind of stuff. And we just see a little bit less from Lamar, and we see a little bit less, backbreaking stuff that took a team. When you look at sort of the composition of their games, so many times they just got out ahead of teams and stomped on their head. I don't think that that's going to be as frequent, in 2020. And as such, I mean, again, 11-5, 10-6, I think is certainly likely. 12-4 is not, implausible, but give me the other side of that.
That's a great point, and everyone should go read the article you wrote on it, because I was fascinated by it. That shocked me, and we have spent a lot of time talking about Lamar, but looking at how his run yardage and his efficiency, not just quantity, but his efficiency running the ball, was distributed on those key situational divides is really interesting. And 935.5, you're right, does feel, just because it has dropped so much, does feel, like a much, much saner number. Let me throw this out there, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. Do you think there was some injury variance that the Ravens want to make sure they don't tap into this year? Do you think the same thing with Drew Brees is going to play an impact here, where it's We just want to protect him a little bit more. We've seen now how valuable this guy is. Like, we don't need to use him as much as we have in the past to get to the playoffs, to win this division. Like, last year was that, hey, we're here season. This year is
look at us.
We know we can make it there, right? But, like, we got to win once we get there. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure we get there.
Yeah, and unlike Michael Vick in 2006, the majority of the rushing yards by Lamar Jackson were on designed runs. So, they're not a situation where, you throw a certain amount of time, you run a certain amount of time, and there's variance because of, what's a sack, what's a run. Like, Lamar Jackson is purposely gaining 750 odd yards on the ground. And, drafting a running back as high as they did in J.K. Dobbins, already having Mark Ingram in the fold, getting guys like Devin Duvernay to sort of do the, the jet stuff, James Prochet as well. Like, I think that they're going to transition away a little bit away from Lamar running the football on purpose. And that's probably going to be enough for this under to shake out. And then not even like to come. I mean, I know he only played 15 games last year, but like, when you look at these props and you bake in, what you think is going to happen, there's always like the situation. I mean, Mahomes missed 2 games last season with an injury. Breeze missed 5 games. Like, there's always going to be a situation where, you miss a game or 2 with injury. And it's why, when it comes to season long props, I'm always under on them, just because, there's the left tail, if you will, of events where the over has absolutely no shot.
We made it to the tail portion of the podcast.
We made it to the tail portion. Shake your tail feathers on these props, bros.
What we forgot to do on Monday that we should do now is the ratings and reviews. Remember, go to the Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review.
We did forget that, didn't we? And
so we'll make up for it by doing 2 today. We won't spend a ton of time discussing them, but I'll read the questions. They're good ones to talk about and think about. And then those people should hit us up on Twitter. In fact, one of these is from a friend of the podcast, Aaron Wiesberg. And he says, first thing he says is, can't wait for the stories from the Cincy Y to come back. Me too.
Can you imagine?
No, I literally can't imagine. The fact that I'm excited about stories from the Cincy Y coming back tells you everything you need to know. Actually, I'm really just excited for some freaking warm weather, because that would help me a lot. Yeah. Wanted to get your guys' thoughts on certainty in team building. Specifically, was wondering if, given the value of offense over defense, does it make more sense from a cap perspective to spend on offense to be certain the offense is good, and to take chances on defense, throw stuff at the wall, low cost, trade down when you're selecting defensive guys? Is that a viable team building strategy? What do you think?
I think he's onto something. Here's my only relent. The certainty along the offense is I think a little bit overplayed. But I would spend more on offense to be a little bit. I would spend more on offense to give my offense more of a shot, and then I would spend money that's not subject to the cap on a defensive coordinator like Wade Phillips, Steve Spagnuolo, Mike Zimmer. Would you
just pay an inordinate amount of money to have multiple defensive coordinators and run them out all together?
No, but the Falcons tried that, and they #won a few games at the end of the year. But no, don't you agree? I mean, like, that's really the hack. Is the Steve Spagnuolo is every bit as important to. I mean, Steve Spagnuolo and Tyrann Mathieu, I think, made that defense at least league average, which is all they needed. I think in Dallas, you sort of that's what you're hoping with Mike Nolan. And Wade Phillips did the same thing for the Rams. So
to me, where I completely agree with this is not spending large investments in singular defensive players.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not.
Those are akin to trophies, in my opinion. Like, great defensive players are trophies that don't amount to wins.
You hate defense. Last one here is Swag Daddy 42.
Nice.
Hit us up so we can get you some PFF swag. I've been thinking about this for a while. Do you think we undervalue the importance of a great offensive play caller / head coach? Is it possible that it is more important for a team's success than a quarterback? For example, Matt Ryan versus Kyle Shanahan. Ooh, strong take.
Okay, here's the question. What do you think is more stable, your edge over opposing defensive minds or your ability to play quarterback?
Yeah, that is, you said it perfectly. It is the ability to play quarterback.
I think this is a great question. And because we have seen that great coaches are unicorns, but great quarterbacks, great coaches without great quarterbacks are what Belichick was in Cleveland. Or what Shanahan was the year that Garoppolo got injured. And Garoppolo's, good quarterback, not great, but they're what Kansas City was with Alex Smith, which is a good team, fun team, but no, not a Super Bowl team. So that would be my only comeback. I think they're valued properly, I would say.
I just think it's harder. So the way that you have an edge as an offensive coach / play caller is by maintaining that over the other, 60 head coaches / offensive coordinators out there. Whereas to be a really good quarterback, you're maintaining in large part like this athletic edge that is harder to kind of make up, I think. Right. So I'm with you there. Okay. Do you have any stories from the Cincy Y or the Wisconsin Y or wherever the hell you are?
I've been.
You got to cut down some trees.
Well, I got a great view of some of the countryside over here, but no, I mean, like I said before, the tricky thing is that I have to drive to get my food now, which is like #privileged, but that's gonna be the new one here. Before, when I lived in Ohio, a lot of my workout was like walking to like get stuff for my family, and now I'll probably do farm chores with my in-laws who are just like a mile or two down the street here, but with my daughter. But other than that, I don't know. I might jump. I heard what you said on Soren's show. I'll try to jump and land softly repeatedly now.
It's jumping is an underutilized exercise. I
agree. I can't wait to play basketball again. I haven't played basketball since I got hurt, and that was like 3 months ago.
Man, me too. All right, well, jump and land softly. Stay safe out there. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.